be a $25 gift card. You will get that gift card from Parks. So we thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We encourage everyone.
My pleasure. I said, it is my pleasure because I need this. I need this. Thank you so much.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. Everyone that's here today, we welcome you here. We want you to participate. We want you to learn, because I promise you, if you listen, there will be a lot of valuable information that will be shared, and you will be able to glean something from that information, and you will be able to take the information that you learned today and use it for the rest of your life. For the rest of your life. I'm going to say something and then we're going to begin. Today, the training that you're going to go through, I want you to have an open mind. I want you to open your mind, and I want you to really, really listen. And I want you to be educated. Oftentimes, we call these opportunities trainings. However, we don't want to train you. We want to educate you. So if we educate you, you will be empowered, you will open your mind, and you will do better. And I promise you that today, when you finish this training, you will not leave the same. I promise you. At this time, I'm going to introduce to you Ms. Chastity Parks, and she'll turn it back over to us after she introduced the individuals that have to speak and bring greetings. Ms. Parks.
Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing? First of all, I'll make it really, really quick. First of all, I would like to say I'm so happy to have ABE and ESL in the same space training together. Like, I can't even remember a time when we have done this. So I'm so excited to see all of my ESL people. Like Mr. Henderson said, my name is Chastity Parks. I'm the ABE coordinator for those of you who haven't seen me before or know me. So I just wanted to say hello to all of my ESL folks, and we're just happy to be together. Thank you, Angela and Mary, for putting this together, for make this all happen. So I'm gonna go ahead and thank the Lighthouse team and the facilitators and all the speakers and everybody who's gonna participate today. And we are ready to learn. So I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. McBride. I know she's joining by phone.
Yep, here I am, Chastity.
All right, and then we'll turn it over to Carla after she speaks. Mr. Boyce.
All right, thank you, Chastity. Good morning, everyone. And as Chastity mentioned, I am joining by phone. I have a doctor's appointment this morning that I couldn't miss, but I'm going to stay connected the entire time. I'm so excited to offer this professional development to all of us at Georgia Piedmont, and we have a guest with us from the system office, Carla DeBose, who'll speak in just a minute. Thank you, JR and the Lighthouse team for doing this for us. And I want everyone to kind of understand where this came from. As you know, our students come to us from various places and various spaces at the intersection of various identities. And it's important that we create a safe space for them, that we're inclusive and that we treat them with dignity. Many of them are fleeing spaces where they might not have felt safe expressing their identity. And so I just want to make sure that we at Georgia Piedmont in our adult ed program create a safe space for all students who come to us from the various intersections of life where they occupy. So that's kind of the point of this training. I'm really excited to learn along with you all. And at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Carla DeBose, who is from the TCSG's Office of Adult Education. So Carla.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you, Megan, you, Miss Baxter, as well as you, Chastity, for making this training happen. You know, it is not often, since I am the Director of Professional Development, that I get to sit back and, as JR stated, get educated. It's usually I'm the one putting out the education. I'm the one putting out the training. So I am relishing this morning, and I really appreciate the fact that you all are forward thinking and thinking about what we need to do, not only to embrace our students and to make our environment safe for them, but to embrace ourselves and our peer groups and to make our environment safe and make our environment engaging and welcoming for all of us also, because we're here a lot of the time. So I just want to thank you, thank everyone that took the time to join us this morning, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful, immersive education. Thank you.
Carla, yeah, sorry. Thank you so much, Carla. Those were wonderful remarks. And JR, before I hand it over to you, I want to echo what Carla said and enforce that this is also going to create a safe space for all of us. That's really important, that no matter how our employees, our colleagues, our coworkers come to us, that we create a safe space for them as well. Thank you so much, Carla. JR, let's go.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. McBride. Thank you very much, Carla. Thank you, thank you, thank you to the entire Georgia Piedmont Technical team. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Today, we ask you to, once again, open your minds. We ask you to be active participants, be active learners. We encourage you to turn on your cameras. And the last thing I encourage you to do is to focus. If you're in a space where there's some distraction, I encourage you to remove yourself from that space where that distraction lies. And I encourage you to go in a private space so that you can really, really dig deep and take in the information that will come to you today. At this time, I'm going to introduce two individuals to you. Those two individuals will be, one of them will give us our motivational moment, and then the other individual will be our facilitator for today. So our motivational moment comes from a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ralph Simpson. Dr. Simpson currently served as the Deputy Superintendent for School and Leadership and Improvement in the Clayton County School System. He's involved in a lot of different professional and public service organizations, such as the National Association of Educators, Georgia Association of Educators, DeKalb Association of Secondary School Administrators, and Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. He's been invited as a guest speaker for banquets, for workshops, conferences. He's actually attending a workshop this week. He's on the way today to speak at a workshop. And Dr. Simpson, he considers himself an ordinary person attempting to do extraordinary things. At this time, I introduce to you Dr. Ralph Simpson.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? Wonderful, loud and clear. I promise you, I'm only going to be a moment, but I will make certain that by the time I finish, and hopefully I've inspired or instilled at least the confidence in those that are providing a platform and an opportunity for those who've traveled the road less traveled, so to speak. So I'll just be very, very brief. I'm a quote person. I start out every morning with a quote. I send a quote to all my principals and assistant principals every morning, but my favorite is one I like to start out with. And so if you don't pay attention, as Mr. Henderson stated, you're going to miss this. Here goes as such. It is the responsibility of the conscious to make the unconscious conscious of its unconscious behavior. Let me say that again. It is the responsibility of the conscious to make the unconscious conscious of its unconscious behavior. Now I'm gonna break that down. All I'm saying is that it is responsibility for those that know, help those that don't know realize they don't even know. You're gonna be receiving people in your classrooms that may not know, but really it doesn't matter. But you have a responsibility. We have a responsibility as educators for those that's going to impart and instill not only knowledge, they might be seeking a GED, but it's something that you can give them that's much, much further and beyond what a GED, you're gonna give them life. Let me give you a better experience. My first career was in criminal justice. I was a corrections officer for 4.5 years coming out of college. That life-altering experience is what led me into education. That was the day that I decided that I'm either going to stand for something or fall for anything. So I went from the back door of the jailhouse to the front door of the schoolhouse. Why? Because I wanted to avert this whole school pipeline to prison, but I knew that I had to be an example to those that were in these classrooms, more so than seeing them when they got to the back door of the jail. again, the life altering experience. But one thing that I learned from the jail or the prison that I took away with is that I was reminded that those that judge don't matter and those that matter don't judge. I'm going to say that again. Those that judge don't matter and those that matter don't judge. In this profession, in this field, when you're working with people who may be falling down, your responsibility is to help them get back up, and you can't be judgmental. Despite what has happened to them, you can't in your mind internalize that and begin to pass judgment on, well, I wonder what type of a household they came from, or who were their parents, or what happened to them. Your sole responsibility is to meet them right there at the front door. You meet them at the front door and you build a relationship that's based on genuine love, care, and concern. Because I'm gonna tell you one thing that has helped me and allowed for me to be successful all the way to this point. I put relationships, and the relationships takes precedent over rules. Let me say that again. Relationships takes precedent over rules. Why is that important? Because rules have a gray area, but relationships don't. If I have a relationship with you based on genuine love, care, and concern, then I can teach you anything. I can take you anywhere. And when I left that prison setting and went into that classroom of fifth graders with 21 boys and 9 girls, it was the fact that I knew, one, I was non-judgmental, and two, that I had these little people in the palm of my hands because I had displayed that love, that care, and that concern. And so it was not an issue. Everybody was running and trying to get in the Mr. Simpson's classroom. Why? Not because I was the best social studies teacher, but because I loved them. What I'm saying is, listen, anybody can become certified to teach class. I deal with teachers, 5,000 teachers. One thing that I tell them, that I've always interviewed them when I was a principal, I didn't care about how good you were at teaching math, science, English, and social studies. The question that I would always ask them, and I would be concerned about, is your love. See, I can teach you how to teach, but I can't teach you how to love. You got to bring love to the equation yourself, folks. So regardless of what this wonderful platform that you all will be going through and talking about diversion and inclusion, listen, don't leave that L word out of this. You know, Mr. Henderson was playing the song, We Are Family. Hey, family is internalized and equates to love. Don't forget that you got to love these people that's coming into your classroom, because if you don't love them, you're not going to get anything out of them. Listen, I hated school, honestly. I know I have a doctorate and all these degrees, but I still didn't like school. But do you all remember this? Remember how good you were in the classes of the teacher that you liked? You did more work for that teacher. Why? Because you liked them, not because you liked the class, but because you liked them. Relationships. I'm a C average student at best in high school and college. At best, my best work was with that teacher that I had a relationship with, though. So you got to bring love to the house. Listen, last thing I want to leave you with. You got to be able to reach before you teach. What do you mean? See, I'm rephrasing this whole definition. Instead of calling us teachers, I'm going to call us reachers. Why? Because you got to be able to reach people before you can teach them, regardless to your content, regardless if the end goal is to get them this GED or that they pass the equivalence exam. No, you got to reach them. That means you got to penetrate their heart and their mind. That means that you have to give them something beyond the GED to shoot for. And you have to make them understand that this is just the beginning. This is the foundation. This is going to propel you and be the platform for you to do greater and bigger things. And you need to emphasize that day one. Listen, this is already done. The fact that you showed up, that you're here, this is already done. What's next? That's what I always tell children. Graduations. Don't get so caught up in this being the finality, the graduation, the commencement exercise. Commencement is defined as the beginning. You need to make sure that when they leave you, they know that this is the beginning. That's what's important. So you're going to have a grand opportunity. And this is ultimately the reason I ended up in education. I wanted one day for people to see me and say, hey, dude, I remember you. I remember you. You said this to me. And I never forgot it. Last school that I was a principal at, our slogan was, you must do something. About a year ago, I'm a jogger. About a year ago, I was jogging down Cascade Road in Atlanta. About 6:30 in the morning, I saw a young lady. She looked about 23, 24 years old. She had about a toddler with her, about 5 years old. She yelled out and she said, "Hey, are you Dr. Simpson?" I said, "Yeah, by the way, I am. Yeah, it's 6:30 in the morning." She said, "I remember you. You were my principal. I remember what you told us." I said, "What was that?" "You said you told us you must do something." And I did. That was 15 years ago. Listen, these people gonna remember what you tell them. These people gonna remember what you impart into them. Just be very careful and be mindful that what you're giving is life. You're giving them life, because life before this has been very, very difficult. You want to make it a smooth and an easy transition. Just remember, this life-altering experience is going to be the best at what's going to help and prepare them for the future. And don't take that for granted. Mr. Henderson, that's all I got.
GOODJOB. Good job, good job, good job, good job, good job. Our facilitator for today is Miss Victoria Snyder. She is the founder of Self-Care Senorita. She is a 3-time Telly Award-winning producer and a diversity and inclusion education trainer. She is a small business coach and a strategic planning strategist. Her expertise in marketing, branding, social media, and diversity and inclusion practices, as well as a thought leader and a consultant for many community-based organizations. Her greatest accomplishments are her son, Braxton, and also having the honor to serve as storyteller and advocate for the community. After this video, we will present to you Ms. Snyder.
It's so easy to place people in boxes, drawing lines, creating signs. There's us, and there's them. Those we feel comfortable around, and those we don't. There are those of us with many chapters, and those just starting their own stories. There's the well-to-do, and those doing what they can. There are those we share something with, and those we don't seem to share anything with.
Welcome, and thank you for coming today, guys. Today I'm going to be conducting an experiment where I'll ask you a series of questions. Now, these questions will be very personal questions, and for us to get a true result, I need you to be completely honest with how you respond. The first question I have is, who in here was the class clown? Who is never on time?
And then there's us. We who have tattoos. We who feel lonely. We who have been bullied. We who have bullied others. We who are madly in love. We who have overcome great adversity. And there's there's the lucky ones, whose team won the championship this year.
Oh, that's why. Okay. All right, thank you. Is it on?
We who beat cancer. And then there's all of us who are created in the image of God. And as one body, we stand together, united as one under His grace.
At this time, Ms. Victoria Snyder. Okay. Ms. Snyder?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you, JR, for everything and the lead in, and good morning to everyone. First, I want to apologize. I am slightly under the weather, so if I start coughing, I do apologize. I have tea and water, so if you see me taking a sip, I promise it's just so I can keep going. So I am so excited to be here. Excited to start. I'm going to go ahead and lead us in just because we have so much to cover. Under a normal diversity training that we would do, most of these workshops would be a single topic and they would be 2 to 3 hours. So these are the basic introduction to the topics. And then hopefully as we go through with this and working with you guys, we'll be able to dig deeper into a lot of these topics because as we all know, our intersections, our perspectives, our lived experiences and what we do give depth and meaning to a lot of the work that we do and the things that we need to learn. So if at any moment you have a question or there's something that you need, please drop it into the chat box and I will try my absolute very hardest for us to go ahead and go through that. So today we're going to be doing our implicit bias training. I also have a co-facilitator with me here. Tatiana, if you're on, raise your hand. I know we had some connectivity issues earlier, so we're trying to figure it out. Tatiana and I are based in Pittsburgh, and it is cold and cloudy, and we are getting the remnants of the hurricane. So I know it sounds so funny that we're not in Florida, but like our internet for both of us, and we're in different parts of the city, keeps going in and out because of that. So bear with us.
Good morning, everyone.
So we're going to kind of go back and forth. We're going to work with you guys on this one. So implicit bias training. So why is this so important to what we do, especially as educators? And I should preface that I am a past educator. I worked in higher education for 10 years. I was, excuse me, in multicultural and diversity affairs. My undergraduate education is in adolescent to young adult education. So I speak your language, I've lived your experiences, and I believe in the same power which Mr. Simmons spoke about, to be an educator, to do the work, we have to love our students first. And I had a quote in my office for all 10 years that said, the students who need the most love ask for it in the most unloving ways. And I loved the problem kids. I loved the kids that were on suspension or academic probation because those were the students with the most potential. They were the ones that had the most to lose and the most to gain. Our high achieving students are wonderful, but they already have some things set for them. So I was that one that wanted to work with those students that really needed that extra hug, that extra hand, that extra support. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how our preconceived notions, the records which live in our head, can dictate the way that we sometimes interact with others and how to recognize them. So that way that we can do more intrinsic and in-depth work with the students that we work with. So understanding your own records. Earlier today, you had an exercise that said, think of a time that you had prejudice done against you, and then think about a time that you enacted prejudice against another person. When we talk about preconceived notions, what we're talking about that is this idea that we hold records in our head. We don't necessarily believe that they're true. We don't necessarily think that it is something that we've experienced or anything of that nature, but it can be something that comes from the intersections of our life. It can come from media, it can come from the movies, it can come from family, friends, organizations, our work environment, of this idea of something or someone. So I'll use the example, something that's tried and true that the media has taught us that we know is not true, is that I'm a woman and I get into an elevator and a man, or particularly a Black man, gets into the elevator with me, and I hurry up and I grip my purse and I move over to this side, setting a distinct barrier between myself and that other person in the elevator. Is that person enacting racism or prejudice, or is it a preconceived notion? So both of those can be truths. She may have had an incident where she had her purse stolen, or she had been assaulted, or she had domestic violence issued against her. So she has anxiety and a record that is a truth in her head that a male is harmful to her and herself. And as women, right, or those who identify as women or femme, there are times that we do hold ourselves accountable to protect ourselves when we are alone in a situation with another man, because of our lived experience, because of our intersection of our gender and our sexual identity. So that doesn't make it that it's racist or prejudice, it's our lived experience. However, the preconceived notion that comes into play with that, and the record that we hold in our head, is that idea that that media, that a Black man is dangerous, that this man, whomever, may cause harm onto us, that this person wants our purse, they want to steal something from us, they want to take something from us. We see that in the shows that we watch. We see it in our cop shows. We see it in ways that we should protect ourselves. So it's a preconceived notion, but it's not a lived experience. So they could be one and the same, but they can also be different. So that's what we're talking about, is just thinking and realizing and kind of running through what are some preconceived notions that you have on different entities around prejudice. So whether it's someone who is maybe from a different racial background than you, someone who is from a different religious background, someone who lives in a different part of town, someone from a different part of the country or a different part of the world, someone who is of able-bodied or not able-bodied, someone who is bigger or smaller. So you get the idea, right? You should kind of get running in your head of like, yeah, you're right. My grandmother always said, or my grandpa, or my mom, or my dad, or someone told me this. And I have believed this because I went to a very small private liberal arts school in Northeast Ohio. I grew up in a small steel town. I graduated with 54 kids in my graduating class. So we knew everybody from Pampers to graduation, right? So when I went to my college, even though it was slightly bigger, I was still going to school with students from really urban areas. So we had a lot of students from Miami, we had a lot of students from Cleveland, from Akron, and from New York City. And sitting in classrooms with them, I had a classmate who had grown up in rural Ohio, and it was the first time she'd ever been in a classroom with someone who was African American. It was the first time she'd ever met a Jewish person ever, was when we were on campus. So her world was so insular, her preconceived notions were dictated to her because of where she grew up and how she grew up. That did not dictate her records and how she acted moving forward, because each of those people was an interaction, and she was able to create new records in her head on her own lived experience of how and what those people were and what they meant to her. Oops, let me go back. So as we talk about cultural competency for culture, diversity, and equity, we're going to talk about a few key concepts. So culture is something that shapes a person's life, their values, their beliefs, your worldview, your experiences, and your behavior. The values and beliefs influence your child rearing practices, how you teach, your family and school interactions, your children's abilities, where you live, and what you do. Equitable practices, however, provide meaningful learning experiences that support a sense of identity, belonging, and self-understanding. So sensitivity to culture, diversity, and equity can support that engagement of families in everyday learning experiences. So many of you are working with non-traditional students. When we're talking about interacting with their family, we're talking about them being a sandwich generation student. So we have to factor in that the student you're working with has adult responsibilities, not just classroom. They may have parents that they're having to caregive for. They have made children that they have to caregive for. They may be part of their community that they have to care for. So their things that they are responsible for are more than just the classroom in which they come to see you 1 or 2 days a week. So when we understand that as educators, which I think many of you do because you're clued into that population, we understand that their everyday lived experiences are a little different than what a traditional student may be. Not to say that our traditional college students still do not represent that sandwich generation, working full-time while going to school. That idea of a traditional student who is 18 and going to school full-time and maybe extracurricular activities or a part-time job, but really just dedicated full-time to their education, it's from the bygone years. And how many of you can raise your hand in the chat? There's the hand chat function. How many of you have a student that you would say is that traditional 18-year-old, no job, just comes to school and that's their job? That's few and far between, right? So we have to even change the parameters and the perspective of who our student is within that modern education society. So we talk about dispositions, and Tatiana, do you want to go through and explain this slide since we're kind of working in tandem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hi, everyone. And before we start, I also wanted to let you know that my background is also in higher education and student affairs. And I am pivoting careers, but once I guess you are in diversity, equity, and inclusion, it never leaves you. So here I am in Pittsburgh, trying to go into public policy, but never leaving diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what is that?
Oh, I think someone is unmuted.
Okay. So thank you, Tori. Let's go dive into these positions that we would want to achieve. And starting before we start also, I also wanted to say, as educators, we are aspiring allies. There is this understanding of the word allyship, and then who is an ally, and this is a personal belief that has been with me supporting students for over 10 years. I was never able to call myself an ally because allyship means that I know everything, and really I don't. And so aspiring ally is what I would want to be. By that meaning that I want to continue learning, because there will be developments all the time. We are in academia. Academia never ends developing itself. So what are the dispositions that we would want to achieve? Being aware of how a person's values, beliefs, and worldview influence my perceptions in my values and my beliefs. As a Latina who was not born in the United States, and I was not born, and I didn't grow in this country, I came here, and there is a whole missing aspect of culture of the United States that I do not understand. I do not understand what was life like after 9/11, because I immigrated a few years later. So what people experience on 9/11, I cannot even fathom. What I can fathom is what I experienced on 9/11 when I was back home in Peru, and the messages that I got back home in Peru, which were very horrible, to be honest with you. And so horrible in the sense of they were so very misplaced after 9/11. And so when you don't have a full picture of information, then it's very easy for us to misunderstand everything or misunderstand topics. What should we strive to do? The second point, to attend and respect cultural and family beliefs, values, traditions, and practices, welcoming perspectives of all children and families in the community. And there is a very funny example for this one. I have a friend, and one day I was talking to him, and I said, yeah, I'm drinking yogurt. And he started laughing at me, and he said, you don't drink yogurt. And I said, yes, I do. I do drink yogurt, because in Peru, yogurt is liquid. And so I'm like, it's not like here in the US, it's more solid, but in Peru it's liquid. But also I have my own cultures, which I have friends from the Middle East, and they showed me how to do yogurt from cultures. So it's very liquidy. I drink yogurt. And so he was laughing and saying, you're weird. And I'm like, I'm not weird. I drink yogurt. You eat yogurt, I drink yogurt. And so understanding that when I might be saying something, and it might not come up correctly in somebody else's ears, because the way that we grew up is very different. It doesn't mean that I am incorrect. It means that I'm very different. And so the third point is striving for effective, respectful, and culturally responsive communication and practices. And so when that happens, when somebody asks me, how can I be drinking yogurt? Then there's the question, why are you drinking yogurt? With genuine curiosity and respectful curiosity. And finally, working to create equitable circumstances for children, families, and others in early care and education profession. Equity has so many aspects to it. There is obviously this notion that we want to be all equal, but we're not. And equity also extends to financial. Equity extends to access to resources. Equity also extends to being able to be open spaces for able-bodied people who can be in a wheelchair. How are we thinking about those individuals? How are we thinking about individuals who do not share our religion, or even individuals who do not believe that there is a God? And so the way that I was brought up, I was told right from the beginning, if you do not believe that there is a God, then you're going to hell and you're a bad person. And here I am, I fell in love with a complete atheist. Is he a bad person? Absolutely not. And so that was a challenge to my own beliefs, thinking that, oh, okay, you are an atheist. You don't believe that there is a God, and you're not a bad person. Tori, next. And I want to be mindful of the time. Sure.
Yeah. So, how do we do this? Just kind of what we talked about, the dispositions. It's about creating, implementing, creating, and then creating to move it forward, right? So we create respect and differences for all similarities and differences. We implement a culturally responsive approach. So depending on your department, on what you do and the students that you work with, what is the predominant culture that you're finding? Is it non-traditional? Is it that religion is the dominant culture? Is it that a racial, like someone's racial background is the dominant culture, based off of the work that you do and the students that you have? And with that means that you have to create that understanding if it is outside of the realm of what your cultural understanding is. A great example of that, my first job out of grad school was I was the director of student activities at Payne College. So here I was, a Latina coming from Pittsburgh. I was a Yankee. I was 23 and I was a director at an HBCU. And so I got there and all the students are like, what are you doing? You don't know anything about this. And I didn't from a firsthand experience. I only knew HBCUs from my textbook, but I can tell you that it was the greatest experience that I've ever had in my life. And it set my career moving forward of, you believe in diversity work. I had to completely immerse myself in that culture, understanding that HBCUs are very different than other institutions and universities, understanding the culture, understanding Georgia, understanding the things that come with that. and being able to bring that into my understanding to be a better educator. And that's what I say to anyone, whether you are from Georgia, you've lived in Georgia your whole life, or you're a transplant or whatever else. If you're working in that community, if you're working in that state, if you're working at an HBCU, understanding the cultural appreciation that comes with that environment, and then helping the students become part of that kind of fold really is what we're talking about. And that's how to kind of bring people into that piece. So implicit bias and prejudice. Do you ever find yourself having a reaction? We talked about this a little bit, right? So have you ever had a reaction to something and you're not really proud of it? You know, for an example, you see something on TV and maybe like a racial word comes to your mind at first. Do you reflexively laugh at an offensive joke? We all know them, right? I'm not going to go through any of them, but you know, one time, you know, there was this, or hey, I got a funny joke. There was a priest and a rabbi and they walked into a bar, and then you get a punchline, right? So we know those jokes, they permeate. How much controversy has there been lately over Dave Chappelle and many of his stand-up routines, right? He's been, you know, Dave Chappelle has been kind of that starlight of comedy for so many years. He's from a little tiny rural town in Ohio. His show was groundbreaking of being able to bring race and culture to the forefront of creating comedy around it. But his latest shows are bigoted and they're against trans people. He's openly said hateful and offensive and harmful words towards the trans community, and there's backlash against that. So do we laugh at that joke and then not realize that it could be harmful to someone who is a part of that community that is being, you know, kind of referenced towards? We sometimes have an idea of like, we see someone who's a little bit chubby and they're eating a big brownie and they're like, well, you know, they shouldn't be eating that brownie. They're kind of a big, you know, big girl. I'm a big girl. And I've had those comments said to me by my family, like, well, maybe you shouldn't have that, or maybe you shouldn't do that. It's reflexive, but it's also offensive, right? That's their bias or their prejudice against me or against others. Going down to treating male and female children differently. Tatiana and I just did a presentation at a school that is a Spanish language immersion school for daycare to pre-K. And we were talking about ways that the Latino culture perpetuates male and female identity differently. We would make the male very masculine. We would make the female very feminine. Girls don't play with trucks, boys do. Boys don't wear skirts, right? Like boys don't put heels on. They don't do this. That is no, that's disgraceful. We don't do that. Men should be this and women should be this. And yes, talking about that gender fluidity now is a concept that is really difficult. And we'll get a little bit into the gender fluidity in our next kind of workshop. But what is, as we're talking about this, what is prejudice? So Tatiana, do you want to go through the definitions?
Yes, these are dictionary definitions. Prejudice as the preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. And I think on prejudice, we all have them, regardless of who we are. Bias is a prejudice in favor or against one thing, person, or group compared with another. Discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially in the grounds of race, age, or sex. Also, it can be added ableism. Sorry, maybe I'm mispronouncing it. Body ableism, yes. And implicit bias, which is when we have attitudes towards people or associate stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. Preconceived notions, our thoughts, our opinions formed beforehand one has enough information about something or knowledge of it. And I think if we see this whole slide, can you go back quickly, Tori? Thank you. If we go back, I'm sorry, to the concepts. Is one following the other one. And so when we as a society, when we have prejudice, we have bias, and then bias leads to discrimination. And then discrimination and bias and implicit bias would go hand by hand, but there is kind of like an order. One leads to another. Maybe, okay, let me rephrase it. Maybe this slide is not in order how we as a society operate, but prejudice and bias or implicit bias, preconceived notions, they lead to discrimination, to discriminatory actions or policies or institutional discrimination. that we may or may not voice, but we see that is there. When we think about higher education and student affairs, I do remember clearly with some students how student financial services at the University of Vermont, which is where I had my experience. Student financial services had practices that were very problematic in the sense of some students were able to get more funding easily more than others. And the question why was always lingering. Nobody would say why, but there were questions. So thank you, Tori, if you can continue.
Yeah, so, here are some of the definitions based off of some of the bias and prejudices that we can have. Racism is the belief that different races possess different characteristics and ability that are inferior or superior. So racism goes both ways. We often think of it in the inferior piece of that. Sexism is the prejudice and stereotyping of discrimination against women, and it can be men as well, on the basis of sex. Classism is the prejudice against or in favor of people who belong to a particular social class. We often think of that bias and prejudice against those that are middle and working and poor. Homophobia is the dislike or the prejudice against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender within that community. And then we have a few other ones. Nationalism. So this is the identification that your nation, excuse me, is better than in others. So Tatiana has this experience from being someone from a different country coming in, this idea that the United States is better than everyone else. Or if we have, when I worked in Maryland, we had a lot of students that were from Africa. So they weren't just first gen, but they were actually immigrants over. And then it was the idea that the country that they came from was better than the other ones. So those that were from Nigeria felt that they were better than those from Ghana. Those from Ethiopia thought they were better than those from Egypt, right? So that idea that where you come from is much better than the people that are next to you. Religious prejudice, we often see that it is a little bit more quiet, but we do see it in a daily way that we work and we function. So that's religious intolerance. Does your institution factor in Jewish, Muslim, and any other religious observances and holidays? And if they don't, then that's something that you need to talk about. If you have any students who are Muslim and they do their 5 prayers a day, is there a space on your campus? Does your class take part during one of those prayer times, therefore eliminating that person being able to pray? So we have to think of things that are outside of our norm. If we are Christian, if we are non-denominational within our sense, we call it Christmas break, right? No, it's holidays. There's actually 142 holidays in the month of December. There's 42 specific that we would celebrate in the United States. So it's not Christmas break, it's holiday break. So being able to reshape the language in which we do things traditionally to be more inclusive. Xenophobia, the dislike of prejudice against people from other countries. Ageism. Ageism is one that is so pervasive in our country. My mother is 65, she just retired, and she's like, oh, I might get a part-time job. And as she started talking to people, it's like she retired and people are like, you can't do anything anymore. You can't function. You can't do this. And she's like, 3 days ago, I was an executive and today I can't do anything, because we see that age, we see the ability, and we think, you don't know what you're talking about. You're out of touch. You're not up to date. You can't do this, X, Y, or Z. We also think of that against those that are younger. We have a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to giving support and encouragement to the younger generation to move up. We want them to do great, but we want them to do it how we want to do it, right? We see that a lot from that baby boomer age. They're still in their careers. They're not leaving. They're still kind of holding true to the roles and the executive positions that they're in. And so there's this force from below of so many that are trying to push up, but they really can't. And so there's pushback between generations in how we work and what we do. And then lastly, ableism. This is really the discrimination in favor of people that are able-bodied. I want to see if we can get a volunteer of anybody who identifies as someone who would have a physical or maybe an unseen disability and how it impacts their ability, and if they've had ableism kind of executed against them because of that. Do we have anybody that would like to kind of raise their hand or in the chat say that they would like to talk about their experience quickly with ableism? Because I think it's one that you really don't understand unless it comes from someone's voice.
We have somebody in the chat who said, yes, I have experienced this.
Yeah.
Poorly, if you would like to come forward and unmute, or if you want to type it, we'd love to be able to hear your perspective. Or Megan, if that's you. So if you've had that experience, we'd love to hear it. About how ableism has been inflicted on you. Thank you, Poorly.
That's not something that I've experienced at GPTC. Actually, it's been my immediate supervisors, as well as everyone else that I've experienced with at GPTC, has been very accommodating. I mean, the ageism, and yes, I'm 69 years old. And yes, I do have a slight disability now. So I have been taken care of, shall I say, by my colleagues. They have been very supportive. They have been very understanding. That's why when you started talking about ageism, that's why I got real teary-eyed and almost started to cry, which I did. I am crying a little bit. Because I think about, imagine if I were somewhere else and not at GPTC, how would it feel? And I can only imagine what it would have felt like. But I started to cry thinking about how my colleagues have been so supportive and so on my side and so caring and still let me do my job.
And I think, thank you. And I think when we speak about equity, this is another example of what equity looks like. Being able to understand that the needs of each individual are unique, and as an institution, trying to accommodate as much as we can, because we understand, there should be an understanding that this individual is a person that is bringing so much to the institution. And so
absolutely,
if I am a very smart boss or a very smart director or a very smart CEO, I want to keep these people who are bringing so much to this institution, so that how I do it, the best ways to be equitable is also accommodating, because I know that what I'm going to get as a boss person is much more than my accommodations, even if we see it from a perspective of capitalism and business.
Absolutely.
What I get in return is much bigger than the investment of me making this person feel comfortable and welcome.
And this is Carla.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Miss Carla.
No, I was going to say, as someone who has a little wisdom on her also, like Miss Jefferson, I think that it is important that we understand also, and this training is just riveting for me, so I'm all excited. I'm hyped up in here. When we think about the skills, the talents, the things that everyone is bringing to the table, you don't want to discredit someone based upon your biases or because of prejudices, because you don't know who is bringing what to the table or what contribution they could make to your organization or to your life. And so, you know, there is wisdom to be shared if you're willing to pause and to listen. So, you know, me and Miss Poorly, we may not be as quick as our junior members of our teams, but we have some wisdom that we can share to help you along the way. And so that's why I think this type of training is so important, and the education, not just the training, but the education that we will step away with is so important, because I've already, like your mother, Victoria, I've already walked this road. I can tell you where the trouble places are. Now you can choose to walk in it yourself, but I can at least warn you. Okay, so there's wisdom to be had, and we don't mind sharing it if you will allow us to do that. But just like my younger peers, I also tell them, I can't click it as fast as you can, so you come in here and help me out. And so we merge that talent and we merge those skills. So anyway, I'm just excited and I had to share that. I'll be quiet.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. And you're right, because with any of these things, when we talk about nationalism, I saw in there that you have a lot of students with the ESL program from a lot of different countries. A really easy activity to do is a culture share. Bring a food and show us a dance. Give us something of your culture that you're so proud of, right? So I lead a diversity retreat every year. We actually go this weekend. We go to this cabin. We bring about 50 students in, and we do a really in-depth 3-day training. And we're talking deep healing work, really deep work. And I get really excited. But I have to emotionally prepare myself because I'm stepping in with a bunch of college students. I'm 36. The only thing that I've watched on TV is Disney Plus. So I am so far out. If someone said there was a new song or there's this, I have no concept. So I have to go back and do like an update for myself. So I have a little bit of street cred with these students. But then also we have some elders that we always bring into the space because their energy, their story, their capability to shift energy in a room is so important. So when we talk about different prejudices, so often we focus in on the racism and the sexism, but one of the things that is absolutely most pervasive in our country is really the ableism and ageism. And it's so hard to prove it. So therefore, it's an unspoken harm against so many of us. So that's why I'm really happy that we had people talking about that ageism and that ableism, because those are two that I feel deeply impact our intersections of our identity and of our students, but we don't exactly have the words and the capability to express how and why that has happened. So we've talked a little bit about the bias, and we're getting close to time. So if I feel like I'm rushing, I do apologize. Just want to make sure we can get the chunk of the information in. So implicit bias refers to our sneakier attitudes and our stereotypes. So it's your explicit belief might be that everyone is equal, but you find yourself reacting inconsistently. How many of you are parents of multiple children? Right? So you have multiple children, whether they're all girls or all boys, or you have mixed gender or mixed gender fluidity, you're going to treat those children differently. You may love them equally, but there's things that you may love about them more than one over the other, right? So you may love your son for his deep love and affection, but you might love your daughter for how kind she is. Maybe your son doesn't have that same kindness. It's an implicit bias of how we treat them. That's not necessarily bad. You treat them differently based off of their experiences. And we know this as parents, if we're a parent, our children need love differently at different stages in their life and based off of their personalities and what they're going through. My son is on the autism spectrum. He has a lot of sensory issues. Loud noises and bright lights really affect him. And besides that, you'd never know he had any behavioral or developmental issues, right? He's brilliant. So when we're in spaces that are really loud, he shuts down and he runs away, or he starts to get scared. And people would be like, well, why is he acting like a baby? Our body regulates sound, his doesn't. So how do I accommodate him? I bring headphones. I could say, oh, we don't want to do that. That looks silly. We'll draw attention. Why? It's an accommodation for him that makes him feel better. So the implicit bias is that I have a little bit more care on those things. So implicit bias isn't always bad. Sometimes it's our records. Sometimes it's what we take in, but it's acting inconsistently or consistently towards an example that we've seen from above from those different bias and prejudices. And we can see here our brain, right? These are the different ways that we have implicit bias. We have them towards religion, your upbringing, your education, your culture, your gender. All of those intersections of ourself can dictate how we perceive and what we put forward towards others. So think of a way that you grew up. I grew up in a steel town, blue collar. Our big thing was that we were hard workers. We were proud of that. So that lived in me and still is like at the core of the hard work that I do is that nobody's going to outwork me. Hard work always outbeats talent, right? Hard work always outbeats talent. And I might not be talented in everything, but I'm going to outwork everyone. But guess what happened with that mantra? I put everything else to that except myself, and I burned out. And that's why I started Self-Care Senorita, separate story, separate presentation. But I was that big executive. I was that vice president. I was flying across the country for clients. And I ended up in the hospital almost dead because burnout, because my mantra was, I'm going to work harder than the next person. I still can, but I have to find balance. So these intersections of our mantras, what we believe, our experiences dictate what we do and how we do it, but we have to remember that they also dictate how we have to treat ourselves as well. So in a classroom, this is based off of standards for elementary schools, but they're still very applicable to our college classrooms. So creating these norms, this is how we can set norms in our classrooms to have our students and our families feel equitable and included. So if you have the capability and you know how to do it, take a screenshot of this. We'll also be sending you the presentation, so no worries if you don't, but these are really good basis to implement into your classroom. Self-expression. Respect how people express themselves. Some people may come in bright clothes. Some people may come in with big hair. I remember in my first graduate assistantship, I had really big earrings on and I wear bright colors and prints. And I had a senior staff member tell me that I dressed inappropriate. I was too loud, and that he sent me to an older white woman to teach me how to dress professionally in higher ed. And so it was a discount against me. It was a discount against my culture. I needed to be whitewashed to fit that institution because my expression wasn't comfortable for them. So think about ways that people express either their gender, their sexuality, or their culture. And is there any pieces that make you feel uncomfortable? Recognizing that and then figuring out how you can allow them to have that expression that they feel comfortable and feel safe in your classroom. Using self-focus and using I statements. So we do this by beginning by talking about our own experience. So it's often helpful to say, like, when I was a student, right? We're not assuming the roles and actions and experiences of our students. It's always going to be I if it's a lived experience. If it's something that we're doing together, then it's a we experience. Those two words have the capability of being able to help people feel like they are focused in on themselves, but also a part of that larger classroom norm. It's okay to disagree. It is okay to have discord. It is okay to have conversation, but it is not okay to blame, to shame, or to attack someone based off of their other viewpoints, right? We have seen that as a country, how one political side against another political side. There's like no medium ground, right? You're Democrat, that means you're against Republicans. Republicans, you're against Democrats. You're liberal, you're this. You're conservative, you're this, right? There's no shame on what you believe and how you believe it if that is standing true to yourself. I can hear you give your perspective. I can hear you give your opinion. I don't have to believe it. I don't have to agree with it, but I can respect it and be like, that's fantastic. I love that you think that way. Well, I don't hold those records and I don't hold that truth, and this is my lived experience, that may be yours. And that's how we start to create these common conversations that move away from blame and shame to a more open dialogue that really allows people to feel like they're included and equitable within conversations. Be aware of your intent and impact. Your intent and your impact, right? So Mr. Simpson had talked a little bit about that, right, earlier, about how we influence and how we impact others. To have a student come up to him 15 years later and say, "You're my principal," means that he made a very distinct impact on that particular student. And so being aware of how we do that and how we move forward. So being open to hearing the things that impact your students. How many of you read the end of the year reviews and think, oh, they didn't like how I did this, or, oh, you know, this? How many of you are asking the students, yeah, based off of that, what do you think we could do differently in this class? What do you think that I could do differently to impact you or to help you or support you better? But in turn, pose that question to the students. How do you think that you can support or impact me as a professor? How do you think that you can support me in the role that I'm doing to educate and support you? It's a two-way street. As educators, we know that we learn and grow as they learn and grow, right? It's not a cup that we're emptying. It's kind of like this bowl, and things come in and out based off of how we're teaching. So our students have to know that they have the impact on us as well. And then lastly, that confident, yes.
Oh, and I wanted to add about internet impact. It also works in our lives as professionals, but also in our personal lives too, in very tiny scales, how in relationships with our families, with our friends, and with our students or our coworkers, how we might say something in our brain, we're thinking, yes, my message is this, but it comes off very differently, or my actions might come off really differently. And so we think about intent and impact from the smallest of scales is big, because the way that we behave and the way we walk in life, we might have some intentions, but the impact might be felt differently. So it's always important to ask the questions, and hopefully we will have community that will let us know, hey, you know, what you did or what you said was you know, it made me feel a bit uncomfortable. But also it's good for us to think about, when we're walking in life, what is the impact of my intentions? I want to do something good, or something that might impact this person, or I want to give my friend flowers, but she's allergic to roses and I didn't know. There you go. And I gave her roses.
Your intent was good, but the impact might not be good. And that's exactly, you know, that's exactly right. And to the last point, because we're almost at time, we're actually a few minutes over. Mr. Henderson, don't get mad. Confidentiality, your personal sharing can be vulnerable. I base my whole company of self-care, Senorita, about being transparent, because I wish someone somewhere at different points of my life would have been transparent about these hard experiences in life, whether it's childbirth, raising a child, being a single parent, being a female, being a Latina. I wish someone would have had transparency with me to say, this was hard for me. Here's my story, so things can be easier for you. I had too many gatekeepers that were like, well, it was hard for me. It's just hard in general. You'll figure it out. No, let's be transparent. Our stories have power, but also being confidential in those that share stories with us. Someone's story told to us is not for us to give that story to others. If they're sharing it with you, it means that they're sharing it with you through the grace that they trust you, that they feel like you're there for them, and that they need that healing connection to you. So it is up to you to know that you walk in confidentiality. Unless you're a mandated reporter, depending on what is, you know, at your institution of what you have to report and etc., just know that if you have to report it, you have to. But if not, that story stays with you, because that person knows that you're that safekeeping for themselves. Okay, so I'm gonna just go through this. Whoops, we're not going backwards the way I want to. So last thing, and then we'll get to the just 2 more slides. We can display our implicit biases through coded language in some of our microaggressions, and we may not know that. So depending on our age, depending on our background and our education, we can have microaggressions against others, and we have no idea that we're doing it because of our coded language and the things that we say. So they depict others as less favorably, or, you know, making poor decisions when we're developing our messages to our students. These are the unbiased thoughts, the biased thoughts that we have in our head and our records that we're not recognizing necessarily, that we hold them as records. So they kind of slip through. So these biases can alter your cultural competency and sensitivity. So when we talk about our records and what we hold as preconceived, think about ways that people have done microaggressions against you, whether it was you against as a woman, excuse me, as a woman of color, a man, your age, your background, and how that felt and how that hurt. We all have an incident of that we know, someone saying something that kind of like had us feeling a certain way within that microaggression. So we really want to be sure that we're not eliciting those in our teachings and in the works that we're doing with each other. So to wrap up, how do we stop this? What do we do? What are the next steps? So first is what we're doing right now today. That's the awareness. What are my records? What are my preconceived notions? And having that hard talk with yourself, that inner work of how am I perpetuating bias and prejudice against others? And then saying to your brain, we need to do better. We need to be better, right? Because we all have them. No person is perfect. That self-reflection is that deep heart work, that deep soul work. Why do you feel? Why do you think some of these certain things? Is it a lived experience? Is it a truth? Is it something that you feel? Is it something that you think? Is it something that's been pervasive within one of your cultural identities? Then incorporating others in. We only grow in our understanding to break bias and prejudice when we incorporate other people who are less like us. So looking at your friend group, looking at your work group, looking at your identities and things like that, Where are you not stepping outside of that box? Like JR showed us earlier, where are you not stepping out of? You can't see it, but I have 13 tattoos. I love tattoos. I'm getting 4 more next month, right? But if I was just wearing my work clothes, you'd never know. So if someone saw that video and I stepped over, they'd be like, well, she's not part of that. She doesn't look like that. She doesn't believe in that, right? Anybody have a friend that is like a motorcycle or Harley enthusiast, and if you saw them, you'd have no concept at all that they were like a biker babe or a biker guy, right? So it's that idea that we need to incorporate ourselves into a culture of things that other people need. So as we wrap up, let's give a few moments for a question and answer. If anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer. We'll give about 5 minutes or so. So if you have anything, drop it into the chat box or raise your hand or come on to screen for us.
Before we do question and answer, awesome job thus far, awesome job. GOODJOB, good job, good job. Victoria, can you unshare? Because I want to at least get one question. I want to get one question so that we'll continue.
Yep, there we go.
So do we have a volunteer
so
for
sorry.
a question? Or a comment? It could be a comment or a question. We'll take a comment or a question.
Well, I just want to say real fast, way to go, Dr. Lisa. I love that you're a biker babe. Like, get to it, right? And no one would know that maybe if they saw you or your backgrounds or your credibility as a professor. So way to go.
Okay, well, Tori, if we don't have any other questions, we can keep going.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to segue right into our kind of safe zone training. Our safe zone training is normally 2 workshops that are 2 hours each. So this is an introduction to what would be ally training. As Tatiana had mentioned earlier, there is a lot of work that ties into being an ally and what that means in support. So an ally is someone who is responsible and supportive. So before we get into our workshop, we do have a word. Mr. Henderson, would you like Dr. Mabry to go ahead and speak?
Yes, I'm going to introduce her briefly.
Okay.
At this time, I'll introduce to you Dr. Mabry. Dr. Mabry is a retired Dean of Graduate Studies, a Georgia Certified Peace Officer, and a best-selling author of the homeschool memoir, Educational Disobedience. She holds a PhD in education, also an MAED in distance education with a concentration in adult education and an MS in criminal justice. She is a legend in the Atlanta LGBTQ community and the secular homeschool communities, as she used homeschool laws to create the only trauma-informed homeschool high school diploma program in the state of Georgia that allows students to obtain a homeschool high school diploma. At this time, I introduce to you Dr. Mabry. Dr. Mabry, let's give her a hand. Let's give her a hand. Unmute for me, Dr. Mabry.
After 3 years on Zoom, I'm still learning how to find the unmute button. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here. This training is absolutely incredible. A little bit about my backstory. I am originally from Sumter County, Georgia. That's America's. And I came out when I was 18 years old. I thought that my family was a safe space for me. It turned out it was not. So at 18, I found myself homeless with no money and no family. I ended up in the LGBTQ community of Atlanta, Georgia. And honestly, it was that community that kept me alive. They became my family. They became my support system. So when I talk about, students in your classroom who are LGBTQ or gender nonconforming or any of those things, your classroom might be the only safe place that student has. A lot of times when you are LGBTQ, you have to think about things that other people don't have to think about, like, how am I going to use the bathroom? And I know that seems so absurd, But if you are like, I am a cisgender female, meaning that I am a woman who looks like a woman. My fiance is a woman who does not look like a woman. And so when we go into the bathroom together, she is constantly stopped and said, "Sir, you're in the wrong restroom." And I am just at the point where I'm like, can y'all please just not be the pee police? Just let people pee. And, you know, when you have students in your classrooms, your students are experiencing this because a lot of our colleges and universities don't have unisex bathrooms. Bathrooms are still gendered. When you think about, when you think about LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to consider suicide, to make a suicide plan, to attempt suicide. And every 45 seconds, an LGBTQ youth between the ages of 13 to 24 actually attempts suicide. All of us are educators. All of us, if we saw a baby in the river, we would break our necks and use every single resource that we had. And we would even risk our own lives to save that baby. And I'm coming to you today because I do operate the only trauma-informed high school diploma program for homeless LGBTQ youth, sex trafficking survivors, youth aging out of foster care, and high school dropouts in the state of Georgia. I'm coming to you today because you all are technical college instructors, and you are where my students are going to end up. These are my babies. When I send my babies to you, I'm placing my babies in this river. And as an LGBTQ person, as a fellow educator, I'm asking that you please not let my babies drown when they get to you. Please keep them safe. Please ask, what are your pronouns? Please ask, do you know where the unisex bathrooms are? If there's not a unisex bathroom, can we just create one? I mean, we've got lots of faculty lounges. Can we just can we give them a bathroom? Can we just let people pee? And I ask you today, you became an educator because you wanted to make a difference, right? So I want to leave you with this Mary Oliver quote, and that is, what is your plan to do with your one wild and precious life? What I hope that you choose to do is save the babies in the river. Thank you.
Well, we don't have to do the training because Miss Mabry just kind of like took us to church. Thank you so much. I have tears in my eyes because that lived experience and that the river analogy really kind of did me in, and in a good way. So this is a perfect segue into the work that we're doing and why we can't say after you've done this short training that you're an ally. You're on your way to becoming an ally, but there is some deep hard work, some deep understanding and work that comes into supporting our LGBTQIA community. So one of the things that I want many of you to think about is who in your life is LGBTQIA, whether it's a family member or a friend or a coworker. We all have someone in our life that is a part of that community, and how do we support them and how do we love them? So my son has someone in his life called Brother. Savvy is transgender. I knew Savvy, they worked with me when they were female, and they've now transitioned to male. And in their new identity, that's all my son has known. And it is his favorite person in the whole entire world, right? So Brother, he does not know Brother is anything besides they and them. I use those pronouns with my son early on so he understands. So we'll get into that into the workshop, but think about someone that you want to hold space for during this workshop, that you're going to hold into your heart, whether it's a student, a friend, a staff member, a colleague, a person in your neighborhood, but someone that you want to hold this space with because that person means something to you and you want to ensure that they can be in spaces that are safe and equitable for their identity. So what does our Safe Zone training do? So this is going to create a network of easily identified professionals on your college campus that are going to kind of end up with a Safe Zone logo. So students can recognize that and say, I know I can go to them. I know I could sit down and when they say, you know, Miss Carla, I'm having a really hard time. And they say, you know, my girlfriend, and they're female, and you don't blink an eye, you don't get uncomfortable, and right? You're going to sit just like it was normal to you, because it is, and you're going to respond to them in an appropriate and equitable way, in a sense where they feel like their identity is understood and appreciated and served. And that's what safe zone means, is that you can become that safe space that they can unload, they can be themselves. As Dr. Mabry had said, so many don't have the capacity or the capability to be their true selves because of societal preconceived notions, bias, and prejudice against them, right? I think it's ridiculous that we have PP police. Like, let people pee where they want to pee, and let them go where they want to go, right? Like, to me, it seems like it's an issue that we shouldn't be debating, but I know that it's a hard issue for a lot of other people. So I don't discount someone else's perspective on it. I just understand what my perspective is on it and try to listen to the other side while educating my perspective. We're going to cultivate a safer and more supportive environment on campus. And this is going to increase our knowledge on the LGBTQIA populations and some of their issues that they commonly face. You had an activity that you did earlier. If you want to go ahead and bring that out, we're going to go over that in just 1 second. But our outcomes for today is we're going to increase your awareness and acceptance of LGBTQIA students and faculty and staff on campus. We're going to have the ability and knowledge system of resources for our students, and we're going to build and maintain a network of support systems for its members. We're also going to cultivate understanding of the importance of curricular and institutional acknowledgement of LGBTQIA students and coworkers. So I think someone had said that in your new CRM system that students can actually place their own pronouns, and bravo, that is absolutely fantastic. And I love that is something that you are going to implement and have within your system. Anyone want to share other ways that you have or things that the institution is doing to kind of create that institutional acknowledgement of LGBTQIA students?
Oh, can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to make a quick comment. I know some things that we do, especially during our intake process. So even though our computer system hasn't updated with the times, because we do have to use the name that is currently on their ID. But some students will come up to instructors. I know all of the instructors have experienced this, and they'll tell you, you know, like what their name is, regardless what's on the paper. And I know our instructors try our best to use that name. So when we have roles in attendance, we try not to call names, or if we do call names, the student has identified what their name is. So we address that student as that name going forward.
That's fantastic. Absolutely great. So what she may be referencing, there's a term for it. So it's a given name and it's a chosen name. So someone might have a given name. My given name is Victoria Snyder. I have a nickname, Tori. I can say that that's my chosen name, but some people choose a different name with their identity, or as Dr. Mabry had said, like she had a difficult time coming out to her family. So she may choose a different name because the name that she held and that other identity or with that family has caused her harm and pain, or that's a past life. So a given name or a government name can be very different than someone's chosen name. And we also see it when students say, oh, I don't go by, I had a kid I went to college with, he was Cecil Shorts III. He had a son, so he's Cecil Shorts IV. They all go by Cecil. And so I said to him one day in class, I was like, well, how do you know if someone's calling you or your dad or your grandfather? Like, what do you do? And he goes, oh, but we have nicknames. So yeah, at school, he was Cecil, but with his family, he was called, I don't even know, Trey or something like that, right? So we have that understanding. We have nicknames. There was a guy in my neighborhood. His name was Slim. He was not slim. He was actually like 350 pounds. I, to this day, lived next to Slim my whole entire life, have no idea what his government name was. I don't even know his last name because everybody in the community called him Slim or Mr. Slim, right? That was his given name. If you would have said his name was John Jones II, I would have not known who that was, right? So if we give that concept of that grace to people that want a nickname or to be called something different, that's no different than allowing someone who has picked a chosen name to be called their chosen name. So one of the things that you can do in your classroom when you're doing your syllabus or attendance or that first day is like, what would you like us to call you? Nobody ever asked me that in college. So my whole professional career was Victoria, even though my whole entire life I've been Tori. And so I didn't know I had the capability to be like, oh, well, I go by Tori, right? So it became where if anyone had called me Victoria, I knew that that was me. I code switched into my professional space, where if I was Tori, I could code switch into my personal space. And not even realizing it. So it's that same concept of just being able to give the opportunity for people to be able to go by the names that they feel hold power to themselves. Some of the agreements that we need to make in this space is that we are going to be respectful. We are going to elicit and have confidentiality. If someone feels great. I love that you say, what do your friends call you, Carrie? That's fantastic. That's an absolute perfect way to be able to lead into that for that chosen name. And it doesn't out anybody within their identity or anything else. So bravo, kudos. That's a perfect way to lead into that. So sorry to diverge from that chat piece for a second. Confidentiality, if someone shares or says something in this space, it stays in this space, it's safe in this space, and it's allowed to be in this space. When we hit that end button for the Zoom, that story dies there, that shared thing stays there. So we need to make that agreement that we all agree to do that. We understand that mistakes are okay. People may say or do things that they don't mean that may be harmful, but we understand that everybody is acting from a good place. And in a space that they don't necessarily, know that they're saying something. If at any time something comes up and it causes an ouch or an oops, go ahead and put that into the chat, because sometimes someone may say something from their lived experience or their preconceived notions or trying to learn that may cause an ouch unto you. And that's okay to express that. We just stop and we kind of talk about it for a second. Own your statements. In this space, you are not going to share anyone else's story. No one else's coming out story, no one else's whatever. If you've had an interaction in a way that you've supported a student, then you use the I statements, not the they statements, because again, this is about you holding space for yourself and not telling someone else's story that can't be here to either identify with it or hold it as well. And then you have the right to pass if we're asking questions and you don't feel like that, but that's usually in the deeper conversation. If at any time during this, if you feel like you can't hold to any of this true, you're free to go. You can go ahead and leave the training. And I know that probably the people are like, no, we want people to stay here. We want people who want to be in this space and want to make it inclusive and equitable. And if you really feel like you can't, you're not at that stage, I understand that. We want people to be in this space that we know we can start to identify on campus as those people that are going to be safe. How horrific would it be for someone to go through trainings who doesn't feel like they have the heart work with this, right? That they're inclined to learn and to hold these truths, and a student comes out to them or comes to them in a series, in a moment of distress, and then guess what? More trauma is inflicted upon them. You've built levels of trauma because of your inability to want to be that space. So there it is. If you need to go ahead. No questions asked. You're free. So we're going to go ahead and move forward into our training. So I'm going to move past this pre-assessment piece because we did that activity. I want you to pull that activity out. So you have that glossary sheet. The glossary sheet said to circle words that you knew, that you were familiar with, to put a star next to words that you had an understanding but maybe had some more questions on, and then to put squares around words that you did not know. Now, unless you're really fantastic and really engaged, you're probably going to have a lot more squares than you are circles and stars, right? Shaking of heads, yes. That Safe Zone glossary guide, guess what? It gets updated consistently because those terms and those terminologies are always shifting. There's always more that's going on. There's new terms, there's more understanding. 20 years ago, queer, that term had a very negative connotation, but very similar to in how words can empower. That community has taken that word back and it's almost become the umbrella term under that LGBTQIA. So instead of going through, queer has been reclaimed. So now it's a powerful word. It's not one that's held in fear and negativity. It's really about that we are here, we're queer. And it also is an overarching term. So no one has to out themselves on what their identity is, whether they're bisexual, transitioning, lesbian, questioning, polyamorous, pansexual, whatever the case may be. It allows them to say, I'm a part of this community without giving their actual identity, which can really create safety for that person within their own identity. So are we all on board? Are we there? We're good. Okay. So now we're going to go through some terminology, and there's a lot. So we're not going to go over all of it. That's why you have that glossary guide for you to reference. But we're going to go over some that really make sense in our understanding of the work that we're going to be doing. So gender. Believe it or not, gender is a cultural identity. When we identify as male or female, that is a cultural identity that has been put upon us since, who knows, the dawn of ages, right? It's our expression and it's our roles. So this is codified as feminine and masculine, right? There's not really that in-between piece. And this is what people are assigned on based upon their interpretations of their body, but more specifically, their sexual and reproductive anatomy. So as Miss Mabry had said, she's cis female, which means that she's cisgender, a person whose gender identity and expression are aligned with the gender and identity that they're assigned with, right? So if you're a cis female, that means that you were born female. You are, sorry. You identify as female and you look female. If you're cis male, that means you're born male, you identify male, and your anatomy matches you being male. Gender identity is how an individual identifies in terms of gender. I identify as female. You know, someone may look like me, may be cisgender in the sense that they're female and match female, but their gender identity might be fluid. And we'll get into a second of what that fluidity looks like and kind of the spectrum of what gender fluidity and sexual expression can look like. So what does transgender mean? So transgender is a person whose gender identity is not aligned with the gender that they were assigned at birth. And this is also often a term that can be an umbrella term that incorporates a large number of identities related to gender nonconformity. And then sexual orientation, this is the inner feeling of a person who you're attracted to. So either emotionally or physically within a relationship. So asexual is someone who doesn't find either gender attractive, right? They either can find both attractive or they really just kind of don't find it at all. Like they don't have this physical attraction to another person. Bisexual is someone who finds emotional or sexual attraction to both genders, no matter how they identify. Gay and lesbian would be: gay is a male who is attracted emotionally and physically to a male. A lesbian is someone who's female, identifies as female, and is attracted to a female either emotionally or physically. Queer, again, is that overarching term. And straight, that is when a female is attracted to a male or a male is attracted to a female. So those are some of the general terms that we have when it comes to that gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation. And I know a lot to go over, right? So here's a few more terms. Sex refers to the biological status. We kind of went over that. Your gender expression. So this ties back into your classroom of how people want to express themselves. So what we're finding now with this new generation is more flexibility and fluidity when it comes to their gender expression. So you will see cis hetero males, right? Born male, identify as male, anatomy is male, who are straight, attracted to females, but will wear skirts or jewelry, pearl necklaces. They'll paint their nails. They might wear makeup. They might wear more feminine clothes or things like that. But their sexuality is fully aligned in the fact that they're straight and heterosexual. We also are finding for women that more women are dressing more masculine. They're wearing baggier clothes. They're not kind of holding true to this idea of like hair and makeup and jewelry. Wearing clothes that feel a bit more comfortable. The pandemic led into something that I think is really fantastic, like the no bra movement. So many women are like, listen, I did the pandemic at home. I'm not putting a bra back on to go into public. I'm not shaving my hair, my underarms. I'm not shaving my legs. This is my expression. I know that this is a norm that we feel falls under like that female gender expression, but I don't hold true to it. So we're seeing a lot of that gender expression is moving more fluid of like in the 1950s, when we think of it, a woman would have been an idea of what we would think a woman should look like in a dress, in heels, hair done, makeup done, prim, proper, poised and maintained, where a man would have been someone that might have been in a suit or dress clothes, clean shaven, clean cut hair, very forward looking. And now we just know that that's not the case. Looking at other pieces like cultural expression, how we wear our hair is an expression. So many of you that are African American may have some trauma to wearing your natural hair or feeling like you couldn't wear your hair or your clothes the way you wanted to in spaces that you were in because it was deemed unprofessional. Believe it or not, how you wear your hair is still an expression of that gender identity as well. So we have students that are coming into spaces at other institutions or in other areas that may decide that they want a more natural look or they want to have their hair different colors. And people are saying that's not professional, or boys shouldn't have pink hair, girls shouldn't have pink hair. All of that expression can sometimes be how people feel true, how they most feel true to themselves, or they like it, or they're exploring what makes them feel good in those spaces. And so that's understanding that that gender expression can be very fluid ago. Right, Tatiana, 100 years ago, women couldn't even wear pants. I mean, even up into the 1930s and 40s, women weren't wearing pants. So understanding that gender expression and cultural expression really can have a fluidity now when it comes to, especially our LGBTQIA community. A term that may be new or you've heard is non-binary. So non-binary is a term used by people who do not describe themselves of either genders fitting into the categories of or man or woman. This is a range of terms that are used to refer to their experiences. So non-binary or gender queer are among words that may stand true. So someone who identifies as non-binary may be a man who has a beard and wears dresses and makeup. It may be a female who wears male dominating clothing, but still doesn't feel like she's either or. So understanding that those typical rules, those roles of hierarchy, those cultural norms, those hetero roles that we've placed, for those that are non-binary, they don't feel like they're male or female. They feel like they just kind of go with what feels good, what they like, and kind of learning what that true self is. The term gender transition, this applies to a person who's in the process to bring themselves and their bodies into alignment with their gender identity. And it's not just one step. Transitioning can include any or none of the following. So telling one's friends that they're transitioning from male to female or female to male, telling their friends, their coworkers, changing one's names, again, from a given name to a chosen name, how they choose their pronouns. They may go from a he and him to a she or to a they. Updating their legal documents like Social Security and things of that nature, medical interventions such as hormone therapy or surgical intervention, and then after gender confirmation surgery. And so that transitioning piece can be very long. It can be drawn out. It's very painful. Many states and many insurance companies do not cover gender confirmation surgery or what's called top or bottom surgery. And so that is something that many people have to pay out of pocket. And a lot of insurances will not cover hormone therapy. So that's something else that they have to pay out of pocket, or they have to find like an LGBTQIA organization or counseling center or therapy or medical center that will help serve them in that process. So it's a long process for anyone. It could take anywhere between a year to 5 to 10 years or ongoing, depending on their capability of their body, their needs, their wants, and their financial capability to do so. The last term that we're going to cover is intersex. This is an umbrella term used to describe people with differences in reproductive anatomy and chromosomes. So this used to be a term, and I'm blanking on what it's called because I've removed it from my vocabulary for so long. Intersex used to be, when people might have had both both sexual body parts, or might have had both sexual reproductive organs, and now I can't remember. So intersex is the proper term. Hermaphrodite, there. Hermaphrodite is a term that we no longer use there. It took me so long to even find it out of my Rolodex because it hasn't been used. That term is no longer appropriate. We use the term intersex because it also encompasses a few more of the chromosomes and hormone pieces, not just the physical aspects of that intersex. All right, so here is that gender fluidity and that expression to that identity spectrum. So as we can see, there's this whole kind of fluid piece that would go with it. So in the top level, we have biological sex. So that's your anatomy, your chromosomes, and your hormones. And you can kind of see that on one end is male and one end is female, but we also can identify, respect, and understand that there's people in that space that may be somewhere within that spectrum of that middle ground. So someone might be slap dab in the middle with that intersex, or we might have a male that's moving a little bit more towards the intersex based off of their chromosomes or their hormones, and same with females. When we look at our gender identity, this is a psychological sense of self. So we have man or we have woman. Third gender was once upon a time a term, an overarching term that was used. Now we use non-binary or like gender neutral or queer, gender queer or something like that. So that kind of neutral piece where no one really feels like they have a gender piece to their association. Gender expression. We have masculine, we have feminine, and then we have androgynous. So David Bowie is a perfect example of someone who is like in that realm of that androgynous. I think Prince, right? Like Prince is a great example of someone who really went and worked with that gender fluidity, gender expression, sexual orientation. You know, he was like a sex god to so many, but he wore heels and tight pants, right? And someone might look at that and be like, oh my God, that's not attractive. Well, my best friend Valeria thinks that the sun and the moon and the stars set on Prince, right? Like she absolutely adores him, like mourns his death every year, right? There we go. He wore them well. He wore the heels well, right? Like I did not know that I could be attracted to a man in heels, but it was that confidence that went with it, right? So again, that gender expression. I may like a man who looks like a lumberjack. That might be what I'm sexually attracted to, but it doesn't mean that I can't find another man who is either androgynous or more feminine attractive as well. Because it's really not based off of this set thing. Really could be as we go through phases in our life or the people that we meet. And so on and so forth. So does anybody have any stories that they would like to share or a caveat based off of this identity spectrum, whether it's the fluidity with the biological sex, the gender identity, or the gender expression? And if you do, go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and speak. For a lot of our students right now, Bad Bunny is like the Prince, right? He's a little gender bending. He wears dresses, he wears pearl necklaces, he has earrings, he wears makeup, he paints his nails. But let me tell you that he is 100% straight. His songs and his lyrics, if you translate them out of Spanish, even in Spanish, I think you can really get the idea of what he's saying, are hypersexual, right? It's about bedding women. It's about loving them and caressing them, right? There's no guessing that he doesn't love and adore women. But if you saw him walking down the street, you'd be like, oh, I think he might be queer. Well, no, maybe his expression is, but he himself is attracted and shows love towards a certain sex or a certain gender. So, you know, we've had different generations of different men and women that we have found that are that gender bending that we're attracted to, or kind of that stalemate for what that is.
I think that this is Carla. One of the trending things on TikTok I had mentioned earlier, you know, I have a young son, so I have to be out there on the TikTok so I know what's going on. But one of the trends that's going on right now, everybody is doing this dance off of that shake your leg, you make your leg shake, that's it. And there is this young person, Peabody, I believe she is a female, but she presents as, I guess she's a lesbian. I don't know what she is because they don't put all of that, but she kind of dresses masculine, whatever. But let me tell you, that young woman, young man, she, they, her, she has turned the whole TikTok world on their head, because everybody's like, little girl, little man, whatever you are, you have made me question who I am, because she's so sexy. And so we don't know what she is, but whatever she is, we like to look at that, you know? And so it has been funny to me just watching the comments from men, women, and, you know, everyone as they're trying to figure that out and how they're reacting to her. So that just kind of fits. It's like, I'm gonna have to take a picture of this chart, so the next time I see her, I can kind of figure that out. But she's sexy, however she shows up, she's sexy.
And I love that. So to your point, Miss Carla or Sean, or however you want us to call you, right? One of the things that I love is that, like, as I am, again, cis heterosexual woman, but there's women I can look at and be like, if I was a lesbian, 100%. Does that change my gender identity or what I'm attracted to or what I want emotionally or physically? No, but I can look at another woman and be like, they're really sexy, or like, wow, like I'm getting a little hot, like they're cute, right? That's okay. That doesn't mean that you're queer. It means that you can have respect and appreciation of someone else. You can find someone else attractive. And one of the things that I think is very pervasive in our country is that, like, I think as women have a little bit more leniency, but we don't with men, especially Black men, to be able to say, you know, like, I find him attractive, like he looks really good, because then it's like, oh, are you gay? And then there's this sense of like fear and panic that someone's sexual identity is being called into question, instead of saying, like, from a man to another man, I appreciate your look. You're well maintained. You're an attractive man. One of my mentors has been doing this work for 30 years. And we worked with the National Council of Negro Women. And we used to have our girls dress up every Wednesday in professional dress. So they had the idea of getting ready. Well, professional dress for a lot of college students can be kind of ambiguous, right? So we'd see a lot of girls coming in their cute little club dresses and then putting a blazer on it. So instead of us saying like that's inappropriate, she taught me how to change the conversation of compliment a woman on something that would be hypersexualized by a man, so they understand that there's appreciation of their body and respect from other women. So we'd have a lot of girls that have kind of like chest out or booty out and say, you know what? Your butt looks great in that dress. It's a little short, but I get the curves. And you know what? You're rocking that dress, like, way to go. So being able to compliment intimate pieces of others, not done in a way that is like, I'm hitting on you or I'm sexualizing you, but of appreciation of that body. So thank you, Miss Carla. I feel like I have to get on TikTok now, because like you're teaching me so much stuff today of like what I need to learn. So, you know, here's that gender fluidity. And this is what you're going to see in your classroom so much, because so many people throughout their lives are going to ebb and flow with their fluidity of that sex, that identity, and of that expression. And also how our fashion changes, right? We're headed back to that 90s, those 2000 looks with the butterfly clips and kind of the grunge. I didn't like it when I was a teenager. I sure as hell don't like it now. So when people are wearing that stuff, I'm like, ugh, you know, but to see kids that like I'm teaching wearing it, I love it, right? It's part of something that's cool. I remember when I was wearing bell-bottom pants in high school, my mom's like, I can't believe this trend is back. Like, I'm over this. We're not doing it again, right? Fashion can dictate some of that expression. Gender expression dictates fashion. It's kind of like a cycle that we see. As we talked about already, queer is that umbrella term, you know, for all sexual and gender minorities. One of the things that you can incorporate into your syllabus or to your classroom, or as kind of a space that you're working with your students, is there a term that you would like for us to use when speaking with you within your identity? Not everybody wants to come out. Not everybody wants their identity known. Some people may be questioning, or they may not have comfortability in it. And so, like, I may feel comfortable saying like I'm heterosexual, whereas my friend might have comfortability to say like I'm bisexual, but other people may not, or people may not know, or they may have that fear. So you never want to out someone. So it's always kind of setting a standard of like, hey, we can use the term queer in this room if you want to, or we can recognize anybody's identities. You just let me know how you would like for it to be done. And you can come to me after class, or you can shoot me an email, whatever feels comfortable for you. But we want to make sure that you're identified. And if you feel like that's a large part of your identity, we'll hold space for it and make sure that you feel like you have equity and inclusion within that space towards that identity. You'd be amazed at how many students would be like, oh my gosh, Oh my gosh. And a lot of that can tie into I have a situation, I'm not doing really great in class, but it may be because of some of these things that are tied to my gender expression, or my gender identity, or my sexual orientation. But I don't know how to say that to you because I've never said it, or I don't know if it's appropriate. So even being able to say that, like, let us know. What I would say in any of the classes that I taught to my students was, life happens. Life absolutely positively happens. We have death, we have life, we have, mental health, we have things that happen, we have partners, we have situations, we have friendships, we grieve, we mourn, all those things come in. If you're going through something like that, just let me know so I can help meet you. So that way you don't fall behind in your classes. When you open that door, you're being inclusive of just not the LGBTQIA community within their own identities of what they're going through, but you're also allowing other identities to know that, like, if they're caregivers or they have to work or they're that sandwich generation, that you understand that they have life, right? My first semester in college, my grandfather had passed, and my religion professor was like adamant that I had to be there for finals. If I wasn't there, I failed, and I'd fail the course, right? And I was devastated because my grandfather was the greatest person in my life. And so I went, I did the final, I barely made it. Like, I was barely holding on to myself. Every other professor I had was like, absolutely no worries. Like, we can just put a hold. You've been a great student. You've shown up to class. Like, I know you would have done this. One teacher was like, can you do an email to me and answer this question? We'll consider that your final. He's like, and it can be within this time frame, right? There was an accommodation because I had proven myself within that class. My religion professor, there was no ifs, ands, or buts for anything anywhere. Nobody got any accommodations for anything. I wasn't myself in that class, right? I didn't end up getting the grade that I deserved because I had something in life. But if he would have said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you lost someone who was so important to you, who raised you, why don't you do the final when you get back that first week of school? Our policy at the institution is this. So how can you create space, especially for LGBTQIA, in that? The other thing I want to mention, and I'm so sorry, the mailman is here, so my dog has to let everyone in the neighborhood know that the mailman is here. Within the LGBTQIA population, their family may not be their birth family, but their chosen family. And so their chosen family may not be someone that they can bring an obituary in of their uncle or their aunt to get class credit because they had to step away for a funeral or something like that. What are your policies at your institution for students being able to miss class because of a death? Why am I allowed to miss classes for my grandfather? Say I wasn't close to my grandfather for his funeral, but I couldn't miss class for my partner, or someone who was my chosen mother, who cared for me and who loved for me, who wasn't my family. If I brought an obituary in, I'm not going to be listed as a child or something like that, but I'm grieving. I'm holding space for them because I'm hurt. So that's one way to think about how we create equity outside of the norm for that LGBTQIA family. The other space that we do that is, trans women are killed 8 times more than lesbians. Black trans women are killed 8 times more than trans women, right? So if you're Black trans female, right, and you see a death that has happened, whether it's national or local, it is going to trigger trauma within you. So knowing that as a professor or a staff member, you're seeing it on the news and someone has identified that way, asking them if they need support, because they may not know that they need to be able to take a day or 2 away because their trauma is re-triggered and they're having a really hard time in class. So again, it's thinking outside of that box of that support towards them, in support of them and their identity. Does that make sense to everybody?
Say something. Hello.
Yes, absolutely. You can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. This is just my thoughts. This is Charmaine. I just think we need an overhaul with all schools. As we have situations going on in public schools that sometimes the teacher can't even focus on the intelligence of a student when it's some of our students that come here are so bright, but the focus is on more so how they look, how they dress, how they're acting. They're considered to be like weirdos. And then they come here and we embrace their differences. And my whole goal is just to get you through school and get you on to college, whereas I'm not focusing on all what other people may be focusing on. But I think we need an overhaul with all our schools, because even the freedom of how you're talking about, you can have these discussions. If we discuss certain things with students, you know, you can become reprimanded as you're having those conversations. And by default, oftentimes our students want to have those discussions. You know, I teach social studies. They want to have those discussions. I have students who change their name, and I honor that. And I have teachers I work with who tell me, oh, Ms. Brown, you know, that's not her name. Her name is such and such. I had a student, you know, she wanted to be called Mars. And I honor that because that's what she wanted to be called. But if we have certain conversations, we're here in the South, and, you know, sometimes those conversations are not welcomed. But I think this training, I know it's great, but is it before our time? You know, we've been dealing with these same issues. I was sitting here laughing at some of the things you were saying. I remember I bought my daughter, not the Teletubby, but the, what's the purple bear? A long time ago. She's 30 years old now.
Tinky Winky.
Yeah, I bought my daughter the big purple bear, and they were like, you know, people were like, oh, that bear is gay. And as a parent, you know, I didn't understand the connotation of the cartoon or whatever. I know she wanted the purple bear. And then they said that with the Teletubbies, they're gay, you know. So we've been dealing with this a long time, but now it's in the forefront because our young people they're hurting inside. And not just our young people, some of our older people are hurting. They just want to express themselves. They want to be welcomed. They want to be, you know, just feel normal of what they have going on in them. But I appreciate this training today. And I think some of our schools need to be, you know, this training need to go on in the public schools, whether it's public, technical, you know, senior university. I think we need to have these type of trainings to have these conversations.
Thank you so much for sharing. And we do get into a chicken and egg scenario, right? So you're like, you know, is this before our time? Like, can we can we exact some of this within our organizations? And what I tell everyone is that everybody needs a conversation. And just like how, like, when we plant a seed, it grows. This training is a seed, right? And so your understanding and your acknowledgement in the ways that we're equitable and we're learning and we're growing, that starts to grow. So you might impact just one student. That one student's experience with you, because you are equitable and kind and open and a support person for them, can change their lives. I've had several students come out to me and they're like, you're the only person I felt safe with. What an absolute honor that someone felt like their deepest secret, the thing that was most of their identity, the thing that they were most scared of, that I was that safe space to them, right? And it's an honor, but it's a very huge burden to hold that too, right? Because you want to make sure that you don't create trauma with them as something that they're having to do. So even though I do this work, I am constantly rechecking myself. I am constantly learning. I am constantly working. And that's what we're asking you guys too. I'm not asking anyone to be an expert. And I do think that the school systems need to change. But guess what? Our school systems, either state or private, our higher education systems are all based in white patriarchal culture. So it's not going to change. It's not going to change quickly, because why? White patriarchal culture doesn't like anything that's outside of their norm. They want the control and they want the power, and that's what we're fighting against. But if we can do it in a way where we're offering kindness and equity and understanding, we can start to move that banner forward a little bit.
And I want
to, I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
Absolutely, I agree with what you just said. I remember when I was in graduate school, this is the early 2000, and all of my instructors were white women, and white brilliant women, but they all talked about white males, you know, that mainstream society is ran by white male. But if I were to say that, people, wow, you can't say that, but it's the truth. They run mainstream society. And I agree with what you're saying. We just have to find a way, to find some commonality. And, our main goal is to help our students graduate. So I would like to see, maybe the public school embracing, not changing who you are, not changing what you believe in, but embracing differences and where people come from and how they're different. Even in the African-American community, I'm dealing with it right now. My goddaughter, grandmother just passed, and she attends Emory. And we know that's a prestigious school, but they wanted her to take a exam the week her grandmother died, and she could not get herself together, to take an exam. So, we still deal with issues that could be so simplified. Just simplified, but nobody want to deal with, we have these rules in place.
Absolutely. And so as we finish out, because we are just almost at time, here is a helpful guide on your pronouns and pronoun usage and why it's important. So binary and gender neutral pronouns. So for she, her, himself. But we really want to move towards the they and them. Even though I identify as a she, my pronouns would be she or her. I have absolutely no issue with being them and they. And some people do. They're like, oh, well, people will think that I am lesbian or I'm gay or I'm whatever else. And that is your own personal journey to your own understanding and why, question, well, why would it bother me if someone questioned if I was a lesbian or trans, right? It's our preconceived records that something, that identity is bad or that's wrong, right? And so again, it's really using them more appropriately. The difficulty that can sometimes come in with pronoun usage is that someone might be a he and then they, and a he and a them, right? And it could be because they identify as male, but they're also saying, I'm okay to identify as a they or a them. One of the best ways that you can ask people their pronoun usage is very simple. When you're doing that intake of like chosen name or what do your friends call you, what pronouns do you like? If you do name tags the first day of class, like put one that says like, write your name and your pronoun usage. When people are like, well, what's the big deal with pronouns? Why do we have to do it? What, why do I have to say this or that? Say you have a nickname and you go by that nickname. And that's your identity. That's what you want to be called. But I refuse to call you by that. I want to call you something different. Why? Well, because that's not your name. It's this, and that's your name. And that's what we're going to use. Why can I not just call the name that they feel called to, that they're comfortable with, that they identify with? It's the same thing with our pronoun usage. It doesn't harm us in any way to use they or them for someone, correct? It's not like you have to do additional work to say they or them. It's not like it's out of your, it's not in your context of your lived experience or it goes against your religion, right? They and them, it's very easy. So being sure to ask people on their pronoun usage, and you're finding more and more that people are using in their email signatures, the pronouns, she, her, they, she, her, hers, etc. It's up to you what you want your pronouns to be, but it is absolutely up to you to incorporate and be kind and equitable to how someone wants their pronouns usage to be used. If you're working with someone who is trans or transgender and you're slipping back and forth between the words, right, that, a he or a she or whatever else, just keep reminding yourself that if you use they or them in general for everyone, then you're not really making an assumption one way or another based on someone, how they look or their sexual identity, right? And that's really where the equitable part comes from. If we're worried about pronoun usage, just use they or them. So that way you don't have the fear that you're using the wrong terminology for anyone unless they correct you that they would prefer he or she. Does that make sense? Great. So we're working towards being an ally. We're working towards our understanding. And like I said, there's so much more deeper work that comes with this, but I'm really grateful for you. We are just at time, so I want to wrap up. I will be in this space and so will Tatiana. So if there's more questions or conversation that you need, please feel free to stay. However, please look into the chat. JR has posted a link. We would really love to be able to get your short evaluation, your assessment. So as we move forward, we can make this more impactful and more meaningful. To everybody that was here, thank you so much for your participation. You were active, you were engaged. For those that spoke up, who shared their stories, bravo to you for stepping forward and sharing something that could have been either hurtful or kind of like a trigger. To be able to do that really means a lot.
GOODJOB. Good job. Good job. Awesome job. Awesome job. So as we prepare to close, a couple things that we want to finish with or close with. First and foremost, the evaluations are in the chat box. Please complete those evaluations. Another thing that I want to do, because we did not get a chance to formally introduce Tatiana earlier, I want to make sure that I do her formal introduction so that we know who she is. As she stated, she is from Peru. She graduated from the University of Vermont. She joined the University of Vermont's Mosaic Center for Students of Color as their office manager. During her tenure, she empowered several generations of students of color. Tatiana holds her MBA at Champlain College. Her capstone project was a proposal for a study abroad program managed by MCSC in collaboration with the Colleges of Arts and Sciences with curriculum focused on students of color. She graduated from Coro Fellowship for Public Policy in May 2022. She currently serves as an executive assistant at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Pittsburgh. Let's give Tatiana and Victoria a hand. Also, let's give Dr. Simpson and Dr. Mabry a hand. Awesome job, awesome job. As we close, I close with this story. There was this story of a little boy. This little boy, he did a lot of, the little boy, he was doing a lot of traveling. And the little boy was headed towards Georgia Piedmont Technical College. He didn't have a car, he was walking. And the little boy was walking and didn't know that he was going to meet someone. At the same time that little boy was walking, there was an old man that was walking, and that old man, he passed the little boy because he was much wiser than that little boy. And he came upon a river and he looked at that river and he saw how deep that river was and how wide that river was. And he looked up at his friend and he said, "My friend, I think I'll build me a bridge here." And his friend said, "Oh man, why are you building a bridge here? You've crossed rivers such as this before." That old man said, "Just the other day, I was going towards Georgia Piedmont Technical College and I passed a little boy. And he said, when that little boy come upon this river, he'll get discouraged and he'll turn around." And he said, "My friend, I'm not building this bridge for me, but I'm building this bridge for him." Every single individual that's in this Zoom session at this time, you are a bridge builder. We thank you and we encourage you. If you could think about when you was a little boy or a little girl, think about that person that you looked up to. Think about that person that you always wanted to make proud, that person that always told you what you needed to do on a daily basis. And then whether that person is not here or not, I want you to think in your mind that person telling you that they're proud of you. They're proud of you because you've taken the step to challenge your thoughts, because this type of session will challenge your thought process. This type of session was developed so that you can say, "Hey, that's me." So that you can self-identify and say, "These are some of the things that I did that wasn't quite the right way, that I'm going to turn and do a different way." I learned a lot today, and I'm sure you learned a lot today. Thank you, and we look forward to our next session. In our next session, we have a lot of other exciting topics planned for you, and we look forward to working with you. please make sure that you fill out those evaluations. At this time, I turn it over to Dr. I'm sorry, and I'm called Dr. Parks. We're gonna foreshadow Miss Parks. We're gonna turn it over to Miss Parks, but before I turn it over to Miss Parks,